What's up everybody, Brian Earhart here with Team Discraft and the Disc Golf Network, and you're watching another episode of Level Up. Today we are at the iconic toboggan course here in Michigan, and today we're going to talk about wind and how we can better play in windy conditions. Let's do it. Before I jump into how we play different wind conditions and wind directions, I first want to talk about something that I see overlooked so often by amateurs all the way up to professional players, and that is the direction in which you're checking the wind. I see most players checking the wind based off of where the tee pad is facing and not where they're actually going to throw initially. Not everybody is throwing a laser beam that's pointed the same direction as the tee pad. So what you need to do is you need to walk up to the tee pad, visualize your shot, and say I'm lefty, I'm swinging a big hyzer out to the left. Rather than throwing straight, I need to check the wind in the direction that my hyzer is about to go. That way you get a much better read, because I mean a headwind that comes straight off the tee pad is not going to be a headwind the moment you offset the way you're throwing the disc. So now this is going to be a head crosswind. So this right here, it seems common sense, but I see it overlooked so often, I felt like I had to start out by mentioning that. Next, I want to talk about a common phrase that I heard all the time growing up when I was learning the sport for the very first time, and make a little bit of an adjustment to it. The original phrase that I used to hear all the time was that headwinds lift and tailwinds drop. Now, in some cases, that's true, but we see it most evidently on the putting green, where a player who maybe push putts with a little nose down does not get a lift from a headwind. The headwind is going to push against the front of the disc and shove it into the ground. On the other hand, yes, if you are maybe a nose-up spin putter, you're gonna get a little lift from the headwind because the headwind's gonna hit the underside of the disc first and give it the lift. So yes, the phrase is accurate a lot of the times, but depending on the nose angle, it's not true. So an adjustment I'd like to make to that phrase is headwind flips, tailwind fades. And no matter what your nose angle is, that's going to be true. A headwind simulates more airspeed up against the front of the disc, and therefore the disc needs to have more spin or be more overstable by nature to resist turning with the direction it's spinning. On the other side, with a tailwind, it doesn't necessarily make the disc fade more and move more side to side, but it makes it much more resistant to turning. So again, if you're throwing nose up, nose down, tailwind is going to make it harder to get that disc to turn with the direction it's spinning. So with that said, when we do step up to a tee shot and we do feel a headwind coming in the direction that we are going to throw, how do we adjust for that? A couple different ways to do it. Number one, you probably have a disc in your mind that you would throw if there was zero wind. All you have to do is take that angle that you would throw with no wind and add a bit more hyzer to it. That'll allow it to adjust for flipping more and then ride up to flat and still fly through the headwind the same way. If the wind gets too severe, changing the angle of release is a lot harder than just picking a disc that by nature is overstable and maybe a little bit faster. So you can use a driver that's overstable compared to a mid-range and get a very similar flight, releasing it at the same angle that you would if there was no wind at all. Too often do I see players that way overcompensate when there's even just a little bit of wind present. Instead of just changing the angle of release slightly with their favorite disc, they club up to the most overstable disc in their bag in fear of flipping the disc over and not achieving a flight that they want. But if you step up to a tee shot and you read just a gentle breeze, a lot of times you don't need to change anything. I can't tell you the amount of times that I tried to make a release angle adjustment or a disc adjustment for wind that was not that strong. There are times when even if there's a little bit of wind at your back, the best thing to do is nothing and treat it as if it's not there. Only when you feel like the wind is maybe above 5-10 miles an hour do you really need to start making bigger adjustments. A lot of times, not changing anything or just changing release angle slightly is enough to beat the wind in a lot of conditions. Now, let's talk about tailwind. If you step up to a tee shot or an approach shot and there's a tailwind behind you, It's pretty much the opposite approach of the headwind. You can either throw something with a little bit more turn out of your hand, maybe a bit more anhyzer to prevent that fade at the end, or you can just club down to something more understable by nature to get that extra glide at the high speed before it fades out. And actually, if the tailwind is strong enough behind you, throwing a disc that's not only more understable by nature, but also slower by nature in regards to how wide the rim is, can go farther than your wide rim distance driver. Because those wide rims need a lot of speed up against the front of the disc to actually fly straight at the high speed, a slower disc could carry a lot more forward and finish a lot straighter, even with the tailwind making it more resistant to turn. Next, I want to start talking about the trickiest winds, in my opinion, to play in, and that's crosswinds. Crosswinds, in my opinion, are the trickiest winds to throw in because the angles you have to hit to get the wind to help you rather than hurt you have to be very precise. And I say that because of this. If we have a crosswind coming this way, hitting the bottom side of the disc, we're gonna get helped by it. If the angle is here, the crosswind's going to hit you and shove you into the ground. So the stability of disc that we choose and the angle at which we release in the crosswind are very, very important. The first crosswind that I want to talk about for a right-handed backhand thrower is that helping crosswind that guides the bottom of the disc, gives it more distance, and helps to carry it right to left. If you're throwing straight, this crosswind is very tricky. If you want to throw a straight shot with a hard crosswind coming right to left with a righty backhand, you either can choose something understable by nature, throw just a subtle hyzer, nothing too steep so the wind carries you offline, something subtle to where you get initial help with the crosswind. As it flips at the later point in the flight, the crosswind then shoves it down and pushes it more forward. It's a very tricky line. On the other side, the other choice you can make is to take something overstable by nature and throw anhyzer a little bit higher than normal. That way, as the disc is flexing out, the crosswind can kind of shove it down to a normal altitude, and then as it starts to fade at the end, then it gets helped down its line. Both of those options are okay. The trick is to not go too extreme on either side. You'll get shoved down too early or you'll get carried offline. Now for the other side, the pushing crosswind, so to speak. This can actually be your best friend, and you can throw extremely straight and extremely far with this crosswind. If you're throwing a right-handed backhand, you have that left to right wind, you have two options yet again. One, you can throw a hyzer release. A lot of players exclusively throw in a hyzer release, and the only thing you have to not do is throw it too low. Because the moment you throw hyzer with this wind coming left to right, you'll get hit on the top of the disc and you'll get shoved into the ground. If you just take something slightly understable that will ride up to flat without getting shoved into the ground or flipped all the way over, you can actually throw it a little bit higher than normal, let it get pushed down, and then it's gonna flip to flat and push forward. The other option that you can take, which is my favorite option, is to take an overstable disc and let the bottom side get exposed to the crosswind. Something overstable is not gonna flip all the way over when that happens. It's gonna be resisting the turn the entire way, so it's gonna get a nice initial helping from the crosswind, and then as it starts to fade, the crosswind's gonna hit it and push it forward. You can get extremely straight flights with this crosswind if you just club up to something a little bit more neutral, maybe on the overstable side. The other thing that's really nice with these winds is how straight you can throw something on approach shots. A lot of us have those favorite overstable approach discs that we like to swing wide and fade back to the basket, but with that pushing crosswind, we don't have to aim wide or do any geometry. We can take that overstable approach disc that we like and throw directly at the basket, knowing that the wind is gonna resist us fading and penetrating more off to the left. So it's a really nice wind, and I'd much rather prefer it to the other one blowing right to left. Again, if you have a forehand or backhand, you can choose to let either crosswind help you rather than hurt you. Throwing that right-handed backhand with the helping crosswind is so much tougher than just taking a forehand and letting the wind help you rather than hurt you. Okay, so a quick recap. Headwinds don't always lift the disc and tailwinds don't always drop the disc. That's very dependent on nose angle. Headwinds do always make the disc want to flip more, and tailwinds always make the disc want to stay stable and fade more. Crosswinds are very tricky, but if you do learn both a backhand and a sidearm, it makes your proficiency in those winds much, much better. Thank you all for tuning in yet again. I hope you learned a little bit more about some strategies to attack the wind a little bit better. For more content on this topic, make sure to watch this same episode on the Disc Golf Network.